My daughter told me I had failed a driving test scheduled for 9 o'clock. She told me this at 10 past 8. I dispatched school buses for 31 years, and that work teaches you one thing before it teaches you anything else. Times either line up or they don't. Claire stood in my kitchen with her hand out for the keys, saying the evaluator had phoned her personally, and I kept turning that hour over like a stone in my pocket. Peter sat at my table agreeing with his sister the way he agrees with weather. Between them, starting that morning, I was finished driving to the store, to the railway museum, to anywhere. So I drove out to the evaluation center to hear it from somebody who had actually been there. Linda Cho checked her screen, then checked something else, then came back from the file drawer with a carbon copy. My appointment, canceled 4 days earlier, in my name. The block letters in the reason box were small and leaned forward, and I had been reading that handwriting since Claire was in the 3rd grade. No failure, Linda said. No test. She explained exactly how a false record gets corrected, and I made her repeat it so I would have it right. Then I read the second line of the reason box, and my hands quit working properly. 2 recent safety incidents. That was the reason given. Underneath, in those same small letters, somebody had listed them. The first one I could have argued with. The second one I could not, because it had happened, and because I was supposed to be the only person alive who knew it had. I stood there long enough that Linda asked if I wanted water. What I wanted was to see the whole file. She turned the monitor toward me without making me ask twice. My name, my birth date, my license number, my address on Bever Avenue. And one appointment, canceled at 4 minutes past 3 the previous Thursday afternoon, by a telephone call from a woman who gave every one of those details correctly. Anybody could get that information, I said. Anybody who has been in your kitchen, Linda said. That is a smaller group. She was 58, gray cats, gray coming in at her temples, a lanyard with 3 different center keys on it. She had a lane full of nervous teenagers waiting outside, and she gave me 20 minutes anyway. She said the charge for a late cancellation was $75, and it had already been applied to my account. She said she could not undo that at the counter, but there was a form and a process, and that the process worked if you fed it paper. Write out what happened, she said. Date it. Bring your license in person. We flag the record as disputed while it is reviewed, and nothing on it counts against you in the meantime. Then she said the sentence I had driven 11 miles to hear. You have no failed evaluation, Mrs. Lowell. You have no evaluation at all. There is nothing on this record but a cancellation you say you did not make. I remember thanking her. I remember walking out into a parking lot that smelled like hot asphalt in the cornfield behind the fence. I sat in my car with the door open and 1 foot on the pavement, which is what my husband used to do when he needed to think without committing to going anywhere. 72 years old. My house, in my name only, my car, in my name only, and my daughter had picked up a telephone and rearranged my week without asking me. That was the part I let myself be angry about, because it was clean. The other part was not clean at all. The second incident on that form was a mailbox. Not just any mailbox. The Dietrich's mailbox, out on Quarry Road, the heavy kind set in a concrete sleeve because their old one kept getting taken out by the snowplow. I had put my right front corner into that post in April, at dusk, and I had told nobody. 4 months I had carried it, and here it was, typed into a government-looking box in my own daughter's hand. Because if Claire knew about the mailbox, then Claire had not made it up. And that meant the woman who had lied to me that morning had done it holding something true. Here is the honest version of that evening, the one I had never said out loud. I had driven out past Springville to pick up a crate of signal lanterns a man was donating to the museum. 6 of them, brass and glass. The real thing. He talked for an hour the way lonely men with good collections do, and by the time I had the crate in the trunk, the sun was down behind the tree line, and the sky had gone that flat bruise color we get in April. Quarry Road has no shoulder to speak of. A pickup came at me over the rise with one headlight aimed high, and for maybe 3 seconds the whole world in front of me turned into a white smear with a road somewhere inside it. I did what you do. I eased right and waited for my eyes to come back. They came back slower than they used to. The noise was not dramatic. A hard knock, a scrape, a sound like a shovel dropped on concrete. The mailbox went over sideways in its sleeve. I stopped, backed up, got out with my little flashlight, and stood in the ditchweeds putting a stranger's mailbox upright and packing gravel around the base with the side of my shoe. Nobody came out of the house. There were no lights on. I stood there in the dark with my hands full of gravel, and I made a decision I would spend the summer defending to nobody but myself. I went home. In the morning, I looked at it in daylight. The right corner of the bumper cover was pushed in and creased, and the plastic bezel around the headlight had a crack running through it like a windshield chip. The lantern crate was fine. That is what I thought about first, and I am not proud of it. 2 Saturdays later, my grandson Owen came over to mow, the way he had every other Saturday since he was 15. 19 now, tall and slow-moving and observant in a way that skips a generation. He walked past the car, stopped, walked back. "Grandma, what did you hit?" "A post," I said, "at the museum lot." He looked at me the way you look at a receipt that does not add up. Then he went into the garage and came out with a block of 2x4 and the rubber mallet, and he spent 40 minutes on his knees in my driveway, working that crease out from behind while I held the flashlight. He got most of it. Standing at the end of the driveway, you would never know. Standing where he was standing, you would. "You should get the light fixed," he said. "That crack lets water in." I took it to Vance Auto Body in Marion that week, paid cash for a new bezel and a bulb, and put the receipt in the glove box under the tire gauge, which is not the same as hiding it, but it is not far off. And then, standing at my car door with the mower still ticking as it cooled, I said the thing that I would like very much to take back. "Let's not make a whole conversation out of this with your mother." He did not answer. He picked up the gas can and put it in the shed and went inside for a glass of water, and that was the end of it as far as I let myself notice. I made a 19-year-old boy the keeper of something that belonged to me, and then I acted surprised, 4 months later, when it turned out he was 19 and not a vault. That afternoon, I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold and tried to log into the appointment portal to print out my own records, so I would have paper to bring Linda. My password did not work. I tried it 3 times, spacing the letters out like a woman diffusing something. So I clicked the link that sends you a reset. The screen told me a message had been sent to the email address on file, and then, being helpful, it showed me the first letters and the last part of that address so I would know where to look. It was not my address. It ended in the domain of the physical therapy office out on Edgewood Road, the one my daughter has managed for 11 years. I did not call Claire that night. I got a legal pad instead and started making a list. 31 years of dispatch does something permanent to a person. When a bus is 11 minutes late, you do not stand in the lot having feelings about it. You pull the route sheet, the radio log, and the driver's time card, and you lay them side by side until the 11 minutes has a name. So I laid my year out on the table. I called the cardiology office at 8 the next morning and asked a young man to read me every appointment on my chart going back to January, along with who had scheduled or moved each one. He hesitated. I told him I was the patient. I was sitting there with my card and my birth date, and I was not asking about anyone but myself. March 14th, moved. April 2nd, moved. June 11th, moved twice. "Who moved them?" I asked. "The record just says caller," he said, "but the callback number is not the one we have listed for you." He read it out. I knew it before he got to the last 4 digits. The dentist was the same story. The furnace company had a note on my account, in writing, that a service visit had been moved to a Tuesday morning because, it said, someone needed to be present with me. I have been present with myself since Eisenhower. Then the eye doctor's office told me something that stopped my pen. "Ma'am," they said, "you have a comprehensive exam on the books for the 29th. It was booked in May." I did not book it. I had not thought about my eyes since the reading glasses at the drugstore, which is its own kind of confession. So there it was on a yellow pad in my own handwriting. Not one impulsive act by a frightened woman on a Thursday afternoon. Months of it. A quiet second set of hands moving my life around while I sat in my living room believing I still ran it. The word I kept reaching for was not betrayal. It was smaller and colder than that. I had been handled. Peter came by that evening. He owns a print shop off 16th, and he brought me a box of the wrong envelopes and a sack of drive-through food, which is how my son says things he cannot say. He got through about a third of his sandwich before he put it down. "Ma," he said, "there's a schedule." "A what?" "A driving schedule. Claire made it. Who takes you where, which days?" She had me lay it out. "You laid it out." "I laminated it," he said, and then he heard himself and had the decency to look at the table. "It's on my fridge. Owen has one. Claire has one. 9 names on it, Ma. Church people. The Vosses. The Vosses live 2 doors down and have never once been asked to drive me anywhere because I have a car and a license and a set of hands. And nobody thought to put my name on the list of people who should see this list," I said. She was going to bring it to you after the evaluation. After it went the way she was sure it would go. He said it as though it made the whole thing gentler. and I watched him realize, in real time, that it did the opposite. My son is not a coward. He is something more ordinary and more useful to whoever moves first. He goes where the room is already leaning and calls it keeping the peace. He brought me a copy Saturday. Heavy stock, laminated, punched for a magnet, laid out in 2 clean columns the way he does the church bulletins. Monday, groceries, Claire. Wednesday, cardiology, Claire. Saturday, museum, Owen, if available. My name appeared exactly once on that sheet, in the top left corner, under the word rides. Claire came Sunday, because I told her to, and because she has never once refused a summons she could reframe as her own idea. She stood in the doorway holding a foil pan of something, looked at my face, and set the pan down on the bench without being invited any further in. I had 3 things on the kitchen table: the carbon copy, my yellow pad, Peter's laminated schedule, propped against the sugar bowl like a place card. She did not pretend. I will give my daughter that. She has a great many faults and a talent for paperwork, but she does not stand in a kitchen and lie to a woman holding the evidence. Yes, she said, I canceled it. You told me I failed. You would have gone, she said. You would have gone and you would have passed, because you are sharp at 9 in the morning in July with the sun behind you, and then you would have waved that piece of paper at me for the next 5 years every time I opened my mouth. So you took the test away so it could not come back and disagree with you. She sat down. She is 46, and she looked, in that chair, about 9. You want to know what I think about, she said. Not the phone call. Everybody thinks it's the phone call. It's the 40 minutes before the phone call. I did not say anything. Dad left Iowa City at 6:20. I know because he texted me a picture of the parking ramp because he thought it was funny that they charged him $4. And I saw it, and I put my phone down, and I made dinner, and I helped Owen with a diorama about the water cycle. And for 40 minutes I was a person whose father was alive, and he wasn't. He'd been gone since about 6:40. They just hadn't gotten to me yet. 7 years. She had never told me that part. The patrol called her, not me, because Daniel had put her on the card in his wallet years before, back when I was working nights on the winter routes and could not be reached. That is a piece of paper nobody ever thinks about again until it decides who gets the worst call of their life. So now, she said, when you don't pick up, I'm in those 40 minutes. Every time, I'm doing the math on where you'd be. I'm thinking, is this the part where I'm still a person who has a mother? I told her I understood that. I meant it. I have my own version of it, and mine has a highway and rain in it too. Then I said the other thing, because both were true. Claire, you signed my name. I signed a cancellation, she said. I didn't sign a mortgage. You made a document that says I decided something I did not decide. That is not a smaller kind of lie. That is the whole kind. Then I asked the thing I had been carrying since that parking lot. How did you know about the mailbox? Owen, she said. In June, I asked him straight out whether you were driving after dark, and he couldn't do it. He sat at my table and cried about it. 19 years old, Ma, and he'd been sitting on it since April because you asked him to. So that one was mine. I put it on the pile with the rest of mine, and I did not say anything for a minute. And that is when she reached into her bag. She had a folder. Of course she had a folder. My daughter has managed a physical therapy office for 11 years, and she thinks the way that job taught her to think, which is that anything worth arguing about should have a date on it. She laid a single page in front of me, typed, a heading, a date line, a narrative paragraph, and at the bottom, a signature. Incident 2, she said. You want to talk about documents? Read the document. I did not touch it right away. I looked at the signature at the bottom instead, because I already knew the mailbox was hers and Owen's and mine, and I wanted to know who else had been recruited into keeping a file on me. The name at the bottom of that page was Peter's. I read Peter's page 4 times. It was 1 paragraph. My son does not use 10 words where 4 will insult you less. On the evening in question, I rode with my mother from the shop to her residence. She passed the turn onto Bever Avenue and continued approximately 2 blocks before stopping abruptly in the middle of 19th Street. There was no other vehicle involved. She did not appear to know she had missed the turn until I said something. At the bottom, his signature and the date he wrote it, which was 3 days before Claire called the evaluation center. I asked her when she asked him for it. June, she said. He wrote it out in July, so you sat on it. I sat on it because I kept hoping I was wrong. Peter came over that night, called by his sister, and the 3 of us sat at my table like people about to divide up a farm. He kept turning his keys over in his hand. I asked him if it was true. Yes, he said. Ma, it's true. And here is the part I do not get to leave out. My first feeling was not fear. It was not even shame yet. It was the flat animal urge to find something wrong with the paperwork. So I did what I have always done. I asked for the time. Early evening, Peter said. 7-ish. 8, maybe. Which one? He did not know. Claire wrote down early evening because that is what he had told her. And early evening is a phrase that means nothing at all in June. It can mean full sun. It can mean headlights. I got up and went to the drawer by the phone where I keep receipts until the drawer will not close. We had stopped at the drugstore on Mount Vernon Road that night because Peter needed something for his sinuses, and I had gone in with him because I always go in. It took me 11 minutes to find it. Peter and Claire sat there the whole time, and neither of them said one word. And I remember hearing my own refrigerator. The register slip was time-stamped at 9:38 in the evening. We had been in the store 15 minutes, 20 at most, which put us on 19th Street somewhere around 10 o'clock. I stood at the counter with that little curl of paper, and I did the last part out loud, because there was no version of this where I got to do it quietly. I looked up the sunset for that date on Peter's phone, and Peter held it out to me with his arm stiff like he was handing something to a dog he did not entirely trust. Sunset that day was 8:42. An hour and 20 minutes of full dark before I drove past my own street. Nobody said anything for a while. Claire did not gloat. I want that in the record too, because it would be easier for me if she had. She sat with her hands flat on the wood, looking like a woman who had gotten exactly the thing she asked for and did not want it. I went looking for the hole in her story, and inside it was a second hole with me at the bottom. I have thought a great deal since about what I would have done if that slip had said 4 in the afternoon. I would have taken it to Linda. I would have taken it to the museum. I would have used it and called it truth, and I would have been in precisely Claire's business with a cleaner conscience and no better claim. I put the slip on the table where they could both see it. Then I picked up the phone and called the eye doctor and asked whether they had anything sooner than the 29th. They had a cancellation Wednesday. Dr. Petrosky is younger than my grandson's boss and has the bedside manner of a good librarian, which is to say, she tells you where the thing is and does not editorialize about why you want it. The first part went better than fine. I read the small line with my glasses on and most of it without. My depth perception was where it should be. My peripheral fields came back clean, which she said matters more than people think and which I have been quietly proud of ever since. Then she brought out the part I did not know existed. She had me look at a light, not a bright room, an actual small, fierce light held at a fixed distance, about what an oncoming car puts in your face when the driver has not adjusted anything since the dealership. 10 seconds of that. Then she took it away and started a timer and asked me to tell her the moment I could read the chart again. The first eye took 11 seconds. The second took 14. She wrote it down without any particular expression, and then she told me what the numbers meant. Most people my age recover in 6 or 7. Under 7 is where they like it. Over 10, she said, is the range where a driver can be genuinely competent in daylight and genuinely dangerous on a 2-lane road after dark, and the driver will not necessarily know the difference because the whole problem is that you cannot see the thing you are missing while you are missing it. She looked at my lenses and said what I expected by then. Early changes, not surgical, not yet, maybe in a few years. Common as gray hair. Then she said the sentence I have repeated to myself since. Mrs. Lowell, this is not about whether you are a good driver. You may well be a better driver than your children. It is about how long your eyes take to come back, and that number does not care how good you are. I sat in the parking lot afterward with the printout on the passenger seat and did not cry, which surprised me, and then did a little, which did not. 14 seconds. At 50 miles an hour, that is a quarter mile of road I do not get to see. Quarry Road in April, with a pickup coming over the rise. I paid for a preparatory session that Friday, an hour on real roads with an instructor named Dale who chewed sunflower seeds and said almost nothing. Daylight, out toward Palo and back. At the end, he told me my mirror habits were better than most people he taught, and my left turns across traffic were the crispest he had seen that week. Then he asked whether I had ever noticed that all my errands were built around not going out after supper. I said I liked being home in the evening. He said sure and spat into his cup and let it sit there. I had built the cage myself. Groceries early. Early service at church. The museum on Saturday mornings. The one thing I would not give up was the Thursday evening lantern program, and I had been driving that route home in the dark for 2 years telling myself it was fine because it was familiar, because I knew every mailbox on it. Every mailbox but one. Claire called that night. She had heard about the eye appointment, because in this family a thing is known by supper time. She was almost kind. That is what made it land the way it did. "Ma," she said, "you have the results. You know what they say. There is no reason to go through with the official test now and put a restriction on your actual license, on paper, forever." I asked her what she was proposing. "Cancel it," she said. "Just cancel it, and I'll bring the spare keys back tomorrow, and we can handle this in the family without the state of Iowa in the middle of it." "No," I said. There was a silence on the line with a lot of furniture in it. "Ma, no. And I want you to hear the reason, because the reason matters more than the answer. You are offering me my own spare keys in exchange for doing what you want. Those keys are mine. You did not lend them to me. A thing you took is not a thing you can trade." She said I was being dramatic. I said I had been called worse by better. Then I hung up, which I regretted for about 4 seconds and not at all after that. Then I sat down with a cup of tea and did the least dramatic work of my life. I changed the password on the appointment portal and put my own email back on the account. I called the cardiology office and had my daughter taken off as an authorized caller, then the dentist, the furnace company, the pharmacy. Every one of those calls made me say the words "my daughter" out loud to a stranger. The eye doctor's office was the worst, because the woman on the phone was so nice about it. "Oh, honey," she said, "we get this more than you would think." I did not take Claire off as my emergency contact. People have asked me about that since. If I am in a ditch, I want whoever will drive fastest, and that is Claire, and it always was. Thursday, I drove out to the museum. We are a small operation. A depot, 400 yards of restored track, a 1928 interurban car, and a shed full of things men have donated instead of throwing away. I built the evening lantern program from nothing, out of a story my father used to tell about the Milwaukee Road. It runs twice a month from May to October, and it sells out. Gil Tavener runs the volunteers. Good man, 76, bad knees, hates conflict slightly less than my son does. He came out to the lot before I got to the door, which is how I knew. "Maggie," he said, "I was going to call you tonight." "Say it standing up, Gil." "I got a call from your daughter." I asked when. He said the previous Friday. He said she had been very pleasant and very organized, and she had asked whether the museum was aware that Maggie Lowell had a driving evaluation pending, and whether our insurance covered volunteers who drove the shuttle van after dark, and whether we had a policy, because that is the other half of what my daughter is good at. She does not shout. She finds the one person who has to say no, and she hands them the reason. The board met Tuesday. Nobody wanted to do it. Roger asked whether they were about to lose the best thing on the calendar over a phone call from somebody's kid, and the insurance man said the question had been asked out loud now, in a meeting, with minutes, and they could not unask it. So, suspended from driving the van, suspended from the Thursday evening program, since the program is the van, since the whole point is picking people up out of a dark overflow lot and delivering them to a platform lit by kerosene. "Pending evaluation," Gil said. "That's all it is. Pending." He looked so miserable, I ended up patting his arm, which was a stupid thing to do, and I would do it again. I drove home in the daylight, which was the joke of it, and I sat in my driveway with the engine off. 4 days earlier, I had been a woman defending a right. Now I was a woman who had lost something concrete, and not one of the people who took it had laid a hand on me. They had all just asked a reasonable question in the right order. The next lantern night was the second Thursday in August. I told myself I would not go. I told myself that at 4, and again at 5, and at 6:30 I was in my good jacket with my hair done, driving out there in full daylight like a woman visiting a grave early to beat the crowd. I parked in the members' lot and did not get out. Royce Buckman had the van. He is 54 and a genuinely nice man, and he restored the interurban's window sashes with his own hands. And he was doing my job with my clipboard, standing at the open side door counting people on with his finger. He had changed one thing. I used to have them wait at the platform end, so the lanterns were the first thing they saw when they came around the corner of the depot. He was loading from the near end, which is faster, and which means the first thing they see is a parking lot. I sat in my car and was furious about a walking route for people I've never met. That is what grief looks like at 72. It does not look like weeping. It looks like a woman in a Buick being unreasonable about pedestrian flow. Here is the thing I understood, sitting there with my windows down, listening to it start without me. I had told everybody, for 6 years, that I volunteered because the trains mattered and the history mattered, and somebody has to keep the old men's stories from going in the ground with them. All true. And underneath the true thing was the actual thing, which is that when Daniel died, I stopped being necessary to anyone at any specific hour, and the Lantern program gave me back a Thursday where 40 people could not start without me. It was never entirely about the driving. The driving was the delivery system. I stayed until the last lantern was lit, which is the good part, when the depot goes gold and the kids go quiet on their own. Then I drove home while there was still color in the sky, because I had already decided that much, whatever anyone else decided. At home, I went looking for the original program notes. My father's Milwaukee Road story is written out in his hand on the back of a church bulletin, and it lives in Daniel's file box in the hall closet, and I wanted it in my hands that night the way some people want a photograph. The file box is Daniel's system, which means it is alphabetical and merciless. He kept everything. Warranties for appliances we scrapped in the 90s. The receipt for my wedding ring, a folder marked simply Kids, 3 inches thick, that I had not opened since the week after the funeral. The Milwaukee Road bulletin was in there, right where he had been telling me it would be for 20 years. And behind it, in the same folder, stapled to a carbon of a check, was a slip of paper from a business that no longer exists. Hawkeye Driving Academy. Dated the 11th of September, 29 years ago. Refund issued to Margaret Lowell. Student withdrawn prior to session 1. Registration fee, non-refundable, $40 retained. I sat down on the hallway floor with my back against the closet door and the box open in front of me, and I did not need to read it twice. Claire was 17 that fall. Claire has told the story at 2 Thanksgivings and 1 wedding, the story of how the driving school in Cedar Rapids lost her paperwork and canceled her spot, and how she did not get her license until she was 19 and had to ride to her own job with a boy she did not like. She has told that story in front of me. I have laughed at the part about the boy. My sister Ruth died on the 4th of August that year, on Highway 30 east of Mount Vernon, at about 4 in the afternoon on a clear, dry day. A car came across the center line into her. The boy driving it was 17 years old and had held his license for 5 months, and was not drunk, and was not speeding, and was by every account, including the troopers, simply 17. He lived. I have never once wished otherwise, and I have also never been able to say his name out loud. Ruth was 51. She taught 4th grade at Garfield. She was the only person in the world who had known me since I was born. 5 weeks later, Claire's driving school was supposed to start. I remember the exact spot on the kitchen floor where I was standing when I made the call. The woman at Hawkeye was pleasant about it, processed it in under 4 minutes, and told me $40 was not refundable. I said that was fine. Then I hung up and made supper. Then Claire came home from her shift at the pool. And I said, "Honey," they called, "they lost part of the paperwork, and they gave your spot away. I'm sorry, we'll get you in next year." She cried at the table. 17, with a job and a boyfriend, and every friend she had already driving. She said it was not fair, and I said I know, and I let her sit in it, and then I went upstairs and folded towels for half an hour. I never told her. Not that year, not when she got her license at 19, not at either Thanksgiving, not when she told it at Melinda's wedding, and the whole table laughed about the boy with the loud muffler. 29 years. And here is the part that put me on the floor of that hallway. I did not do it because I thought Claire was a bad driver. She was a careful kid. I did it because I could not survive the picture in my head, and because I did not believe for 1 second that she would agree to wait if I asked her to, and because it was so much easier to hand her a story about a lost form than to sit across from my daughter and say, "I am afraid, and I need you to give me a year." Claire canceled my evaluation because she could not survive a picture in her head, and because she did not believe I would agree to anything if she asked, and because it was easier to hand me a story about a failed test. She did not learn that from a magazine. I have heard people say that the worst thing about your children is that they are watching. That is not it. Mine was not watching. Mine was 17 and believed me, and put the whole thing away as bad luck, and then 29 years later, stood in my kitchen and did the identical arithmetic without ever once knowing where she got it. I got up eventually, because the floor is a bad place for my hip, and put the slip and the bulletin on the kitchen table side by side. It would be a nicer story if I said I forgave her right then. I did not. I was still furious, and both things stayed true at the same time, and neither one canceled the other out. Nobody tells you that part about being the parent of a grown woman. But I knew by then it was not a fight I could win at my own kitchen table, because everybody at that table had a document and a grievance and a good reason. In the morning, I called the family services office downtown and asked what it cost to sit in a room with a mediator. Then I called Claire and Peter, and I said, "Not my kitchen. Somewhere with a stranger in the room and rules about who talks." The mediator had an opening on the 28th. My road evaluation was the 22nd. I did not arrange it that way, but I would not have arranged it any other way. I brought Linda everything on the 18th. My written statement, dated and signed, with the times laid out the way I used to write up an incident on a route. My license, in person, the drugstore receipt, the body shop invoice from Vance for the bezel and bulb, which I put on top of the pile myself, because if I was going to ask the state of Iowa to believe me about a form I did not sign, I was not going to hide the one I had. Linda read the mailbox paragraph twice. Then she looked up. "You could have left this out." "I could have," I said. "I have already tried that. It cost me 4 months, and it cost my grandson a summer of carrying something that was never his." She marked the record disputed. She said the $75 would be reviewed, and that she was taking the whole thing to her supervisor because a third party had changed a citizen's record over the telephone with nothing but a birth date, and that was not a Maggie Lowell problem. That was a hole in the wall. The road evaluation cost $312. I paid it myself, in cash, and I have the receipt for that too. 90 minutes. Linda in the passenger seat with a clipboard, city streets, then the county roads, then the on-ramp at Collins where you have about 100 yards to make a decision and mean it. I was good. I want that said plainly because I earned it. Smooth on the ramp, no riding the brake. I called the school zone before the sign. When a delivery truck cut me off on First Avenue, I let it go and adjusted, and Linda made a small mark and said nothing. Then we did the last section, which they scheduled deliberately, and which she had told me about in advance because she does not believe in ambushes. Dusk, 6:40 in the evening, out on a county blacktop with no streetlights and a line of oncoming traffic coming home from town. I knew it was going badly while it was happening, which is its own particular flavor of bad. The third set of headlights washed everything out, and I lifted off the accelerator and drifted maybe 8 inches toward the shoulder, and I did it again 2 cars later, and Linda's pen moved both times. We came back into the lot at 7:15. She parked the clipboard on her knee and gave it to me straight. Passed. Overall performance above the average for her caseload, and she wanted me to hear that first because it was true, and because most people never hear the good half. And a recommendation. Daylight only. Sunrise to 30 minutes before sunset, for 6 months, with a reassessment after, and if the reassessment goes the way she expects, a permanent restriction rather than a temporary one. I asked her if I had to accept it. She said the recommendation goes on the record either way, and that people in my situation usually sign a voluntary restricted plan because the alternative is waiting for a referral to make the decision for you, with less say in it. I sat there in the lot where I had sat in July, because here is what I understood. Holding that clipboard. If I signed it, Claire won, not the argument. She had lost the argument the moment Linda pulled that carbon copy out of the drawer. But she would have been right, and being right would launder the whole thing. And by Christmas, the family story would be that Claire had known all along and had just gone about it a little strong. I signed it in the parking lot on the roof of my own car. 6 days before the mediation, before I said one word to my daughter. The day before, I drove to Owen's apartment on 12th in the afternoon, on purpose, and made him come down to the parking lot. I told him I was sorry. Not the kind you say fast. I told him that when I asked him not to make a conversation out of that bumper, I had handed a 19-year-old a choice between lying to his mother and betraying his grandmother, that there was no version of it where he came out clean, and that I had done it because it was easier for me. He stood there with his hands in his pockets looking at the asphalt. "I didn't plan on telling her," he said. "She asked me flat out, and I couldn't do it. You did the right thing." "Everybody keeps saying that," he said, and then his voice did something. And he said, "But you've been weird with me since July, and I thought you knew, and I thought that was why." I had not known. I had just been ashamed, and shame from a distance looks exactly like coldness. That is worth knowing at any age. The mediation was at 9 on the 28th, in a room on First Avenue with a round table, which I am told is deliberate. The mediator was a woman named Denise Hardigan. She laid out the rules in about 90 seconds. One person speaks, no interrupting. No history older than the thing we came for unless it is directly relevant, and she would be the judge of relevant. I told her the history was the thing we came for. She said we would see. Claire went first, with her folder. She got 2 minutes into a well-organized account of her concerns before Denise stopped her and asked a question so simple it changed the room. "Mrs. Mercer, When you called the evaluation center, what did you want to happen? Claire opened her mouth, closed it. I wanted it to already be decided, she said, before I had to ask her. Denise wrote that down. Then she asked why. Because if I asked, she'd say no, Claire said, and then I would have to either force it or live with it. And I have already lived with it once. I lived with it for 40 minutes with a picture of a parking ramp on my phone. Then it was mine. I said the true things in order, because if you do not put them in order, you end up only saying the ones that flatter you. I hit the Dietrich's mailbox on Quarry Road on the 9th of April at dusk because a set of headlights took my vision and it did not come back fast enough. I told nobody. I had my grandson repair the evidence. I paid a body shop in cash and put the receipt in the glove box. And when my daughter began to be afraid, I treated her fear as an attack because that was cheaper than treating it as information. Peter said, "Ma," and I said, "Let me finish." I said, "None of that makes the cancellation acceptable. Both of those things are going to be true in this room at the same time, and nobody is trading one for the other." Then I put the Hawkeye slip on the table and turned it so it faced Claire. She read it. She read it again. She looked up at me, and her face went through about 4 things. "The driving school didn't lose your paperwork," I said. "There was no lost paperwork. Your Aunt Ruth had been dead 5 weeks, and I could not stand it. So I called them, and I withdrew you, and I lied to your face at that table, and then I let you tell the story wrong for 29 years, because it was comfortable." The room was very quiet. Denise did not write anything. Claire said, "You taught me this." And I said, "Yes, I did." Then I reached into my bag and put down 2 more pieces of paper, side by side where everyone could see them. The corrected record from the evaluation center, with the cancellation mark disputed and my name cleared of a failure I never had. And my voluntary restricted plan, daylight only, 6 months, signed on the 22nd, in a parking lot, with nobody watching. It took 2 sessions and a page of terms that Denise typed up and we all initialed, which is not romantic and is the only reason it is held. Claire returned the spare keys in that room, both of them, house and car, set on the table rather than into my hand. She came off every account I have. She stays as my emergency contact, at my request, which took some explaining to Peter. She does not schedule anything for me that I have not asked her to schedule. Not once. Not helpfully, not as a surprise. And I do not conceal anything about my driving. Not a scrape, not a near miss, not a night I felt off. If I hit a mailbox in April, my daughter hears about it in April. That last one was mine to offer, and it cost me more than the keys cost her. We talk on Sundays. 1 call, sometimes an hour, sometimes 11 minutes. Some weeks it is stiff. Some weeks she tells me about a patient who cried in the parking lot and I tell her about Gil's knees. And after we hang up, I sit there feeling like I got my daughter back for 4 minutes. It works because it has rules, not because we are healed. Linda's supervisor took the cancellation upstairs. The center refunded the $75, which arrived as a check made out to Maggie Lowell, and which I have not framed, but have thought about framing. And starting the 1st of October, no third party can change an appointment on that system by telephone with a name and a birth date. They call the driver back at the number on file and ask 2 questions only the driver would know the answers to. Linda called to tell me that herself. She said it in the flattest voice imaginable, and I could hear exactly how pleased she was. Isolde Daniel said on in September, $9,400 to a young man from Anamosa who wanted it for his wife because it was clean and had no rust. And I stood in the driveway and let him look under it as long as he wanted. That car and I went to my husband's funeral together. I bought something smaller, better in a crosswind, with mirrors I can actually use. I gave up the Thursday lantern program. Royce runs it. He moved the loading back to the platform end after I explained why, and he did not have to, and he did it anyway. I run the Saturday morning shop tour now, 9 to noon, when the light through the depot windows hits the Interurban's brass, and every single person on that tour thinks they discovered it themselves. I do not drive after dark. Not a compromise, not most of the time, not except in emergencies. I drive in daylight, and when the light goes, I am done, and there are evenings that cost me something, and I pay it. In the 2nd week of September, Claire drove me out to Lantern Night. She asked. I said yes. We stood at the back and watched 40 people go quiet the way they always do, and she did not say anything about my eyes or my car or my age, and neither did I about hers, and it was the best 2 hours we have had in 7 years. She brought me home at dusk, not dark yet, that blue part before. I unlocked my own door with my own key and I dropped it in the china bowl on the hall table where it has lived since 1984. Then I picked up the program off the table, the one with the schedule on the front and my father's Milwaukee Road story printed inside, and I held it out to her. "Take it," I said. I wrote the inside part. She stood on my step and read the whole thing before she went to her car. I watched her taillights go down Bever Avenue in the last of the light. Then I turned around and went in and put the porch lamp on, and I did not stand there wishing I was going anywhere.